on AM 560 The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next in our 1 hour heating and air conditioning weather center. We'll have a blend of sun and clouds today. We'll top out at 73 degrees, mainly cloudy, overnight warm, an evening shower followed by rain into the morning hours, a low of 63. Currently clouds and sun, 55 at O'Hare. Next news coming up at 8. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Watch today's show live right now on the Income Store live video stream at 560theanswer.com.
If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. So, of course, President Trump is facing criticism from all angles on his decision to remove U.S. military presence in Syria, including from his erstwhile neocon allies like Senator Lindsey Graham. But I point you to this interesting piece in the Wall Street Journal by the always thought-provoking Walter Russell Mead, who was a foreign affairs professor at Yale and now is at Bard College, where he also teaches humanities. He writes, much of the criticism of Trump is justified. Erratic nature of Trump-era policymaking, often unpredictable policy mix that results. However, there are two other stories from the Middle East in the last week that make the American position in the region an odd mix of dominance and impotence that makes good policymaking difficult. And it well predates Trump. The first development is a success story that undermines how dominant the U.S. can become. Fearing U.S. sanctions, China National Petroleum Corp has abandoned plans for a multi-billion-dollar investment in an Iranian gas field, part of a broader Chinese retreat from Iran in the face of American pressure. Well, that's good, and it's an accomplishment for the Trump administration. The second development, the violent protests shaking Iraq, which tell us something equally important. The U.S. may be the paramount power in the region, but nobody has a solution to the developmental and political crisis that continues to destabilize too many countries across the Middle East. Iraq isn't the only country in the region trapped in a cycle of dysfunctional governance and blocked development. The forces that produced the Arab Spring remain at work in the region, but the progress is uneven at best. He goes on, Walter Russell Mead, Trump isn't the first president to try to hold America back from a Middle East conflict. While Mr. Trump's Syria decision may also prove to be a mistake, as was Obama's drawing of the red line and subsequently not defending it, it should give the establishment pause that two presidents as different as Obama and Trump reach similar conclusions about the political risks in the Middle East. The U.S. may be the most powerful actor in the region, but it can't resolve the economic and social conflicts that destabilize the Middle East. As long as that is the case, those who want presidents to commit to long-term military engagements, however limited and however advantageous, must expect a skeptical hearing in the Oval Office.
Well, that's not, but President Trump yesterday offered a bizarre defense for his abrupt decision to pull U.S. forces out of northern Syria.
Now, the Kurds are fighting for their land, just so you understand. They're fighting for their land. And as somebody wrote in a very, very powerful article today, they didn't help us in the Second World War. They didn't help us with Normandy, as an example. They mentioned names of different battles. They were there, but they're there to help us with their land. And that's a different thing. In addition to that, we have spent tremendous amounts of money on helping the Kurds in terms of ammunition, in terms of weapons, in terms of money, in terms of pay. With all of that being said, we like the Kurds.
For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by Stephen Bucci, retired Army Special Forces officer, top Pentagon official. He's a visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Stephen, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show.
What's your reaction to the decision, and then to some uneven opinion outside of political circles and academic circles? I point to Walter Russell Mead about the judiciousness of open-ended presence, military presence in places like Syria?
Well, I think that starting with that part, look, we don't have a long-term set of interests in Syria. Our involvement in Syria was solely based on trying to put down ISIS. You know, some people have tried to say, oh, but we should be in there helping get rid of Assad and all that. You know, none of the presidents who've been involved in this had that as a goal. True, the Kurds helped us, but remember, when you say the Kurds helped us, all the Kurds are not uniform. They're not one large group. You know, you hear people say, oh, but they protected the Yazidis. Okay, those were the Kurds in Iraq. They're not the Kurds in Syria. They're different groups. And this group in Syria is more attached to some of the Kurds that are in the actual sovereign territory of Turkey. And they have been declared a terrorist group by not just the Turks, but by the United States, by the UN, by NATO, and the guys in Syria are their affiliate. So, yes, they did help us, but they're not innocent bystanders. They're not, you know, just the nicest guys in the world. They're really good fighters, but they're not, you know, babes sitting there waiting to be slaughtered. So bottom line is this is a very complicated, very complex issue that a lot of the pundits and a lot of the politicians are trying to boil down to a couple of sound bites, and that's just not serving the nation or our people well in trying to explain this.
Well, what about the detention centers that have some 11,000 members of ISIS in it? Because the Kurds are leaving their posts, and President Trump thinks that those 11,000 people are just going to go back to Europe.
Well, that's, you know, we have told the Turks, look, if you're coming in there and, you know, you want control of this area, you're building this so-called buffer zone so you can move the 3 million Syrian refugees out of your country back into their country. Part of that isn't just building camps for the refugees. It's going to be taking charge of these ISIS personnel and these detainees and managing them and not letting them get loose, head back to Europe. And, you know, hopefully the United States and the rest of the international community will hold Turkey's feet to the fire on that responsibility. You know, you want to be in charge, you got to be in charge. And that was the message that was sent to them by multiple sources as they go forward with this operation.
Are we being naive to believe that Syria, Jordan, Turkey, Iran, Iraq, the Gulf states can deal with what remains of ISIS?
No, you know, I don't think we are. I think those countries can deal with what remains. They were not able to deal with it at their height. Obviously, we had to go in there with other folks and help them. But, you know, ISIS is pretty well beat down now. They're not gone, clearly. But, you know, hopefully this handoff back to the regional powers is the right time to do it. I tend to agree with Professor Mead that this is not something we ever signed up to be in forever. And, you know, folks, you know, we didn't have enough soldiers there to protect the Kurds anyway. If the Turks really decided to come in, it's not like we had multiple, you know, army divisions or marine divisions there fighting. We only had advisors and logistical personnel anyway.
Well,
some of my old, you know, special operators.
We're providing artillery support and the like, yeah.
Yeah.
But are we talking, about 1,000 U.S. troops were there?
That's, you know, they have not for a long time listed the actual number, but that seems to be the consensus on most of the experts. It's around 1,000, which means it could be 1,200 or it could be 800. So it's not a significant cohesive fighting force. They're mostly support personnel with some special operators to do particular missions, but not enough to hold off a major conventional force, which, by the way, is a NATO ally. So we don't really want to fight Turkey. That's kind of awkward for us and for them. So we're kind of protecting our guys, making sure they don't get caught in the middle, because to be honest with you, we don't like American forces being tripwires, and we really don't want to have a pitched battle with a NATO ally.
Your colleague at Heritage, Jim Carafano, in an interview sort of framed it this way. So basically, here's our three concerns in the region as it pertains to this decision. We don't want another caliphate. We want the problems of Syria to stay in Syria. In other words, we don't want another situation of a destabilizing refugee crisis that impacts allies like Jordan. And thirdly, we don't want Iran to be able to establish a platform in Syria that they can use to threaten Israel. And so he essentially says those are our three goals. And so then we have to ask the question, does the continued troop presence there serve to achieve any of those three goals? If it doesn't, then we shouldn't be there. If it does, then we should.
Well, I would add a nuance to Jim's characterization there. I think that the presence there does lend itself to contributing to those goals, but is it sufficient to warrant staying there really long term? Turkey coming in there, if Turkey can actually set up this buffer zone that they are claiming they're going to set up, and if they can take charge of the ISIS detainees in a meaningful way, I think it will actually contribute to those goals and serve the purpose of freeing up our guys and gals to go somewhere else or to just come home, which, President Trump did campaign on that. He didn't want to leave people everywhere. So I think there's some room to say, if we leave and the Turks come in, we will still be contributing to those goals. But it left to itself, if the Turks didn't want to do this, I think it would be smart to leave our guys there. Since the Turks are going to try and do this, it's probably more sensible to move them out.
And Doug Bondo, writing in the National Interest, admittedly, he is a libertarian non-interventionist, but he does point to an extraordinary record of failure in the region, whether it be state building exercises or something less audacious. And so if you agree with that, and we understand the history of not being able to do the things that we hoped we'd be able to do, so easily exporting small d democracy to places like North Africa and the Middle East, then why so vociferous a response from both Democrats and Republicans to Trump's decision to withdraw, as you say, between 800 and 1,200 troops from this region? It seems that the response is disproportionate to the action.
Well, there's a couple of factors at play here. One is on the Democrat side, anything President Trump does, they're going to try and throw gasoline on and set it on fire because they think that's politically advantageous. On the other hand, because so many folks conflate the different Kurdish groups and think, well, if the Turks are going to come in and slap around this, one of the smaller Kurdish populations in Syria, that means they're dumping on all of them. And, we've abandoned these folks that fought with us in Iraq, and they're not all the same. So some of it is based on an incomplete understanding of who the heck is playing in this scene. And there's a lot of investment on the part of neocon types that we should be there and we should be doing something, but most of them actually want us not just to leave the 1,200, they want us to move on and dethrone Assad, which frankly we're not going to do. That's never been in the cards. It's never been our goal, and they would like to see us do more. That's not happening. And so if you're neither fish or fowl, sometimes it's best to get out. So I'm not a libertarian. I do believe in the use of military power to protect our interests abroad. But in this case, we're not talking about, if this was happening in Jordan, yeah, that's in our interest to go in there, send in troops, and help an allied government. You know, going in and fighting a NATO ally and a government that's supported by Iran and Russia in that region, this is a losing fight in the long term. So people have different reasons. Sorry for the long answer to your short question,
No,
but it's complicated.
No.
And folks have different reasons for going crazy over this decision, and some of them are valid, some of them are not.
No, that's exactly. No, I appreciate it. We want light here, not heat. Heat is easy. That's what the politicians do. So we appreciate the light that you've provided, Stephen Bucci, who is a retired Army Special Forces officer and top Pentagon official. He's a visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate your insights.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show.
Always a pleasure. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Know what you're thinking. Should I shave my head? Comb it over? Wear a hat? Just stop. This isn't 1970. Keep your hair and your confidence because Bosley, America's #1 hair restoration expert, can give you your real, natural-looking hair back permanently. They're giving away an absolutely free information kit and a free gift card to everyone who texts MORE to 85850. Dude, you don't have to look like your dad because this isn't your dad's hair loss treatment. People all over the country trust Bosley because they use the latest technology